This segment will discuss two rental subsidy programs, one federal and one state-sponsored. They are the Housing and Urban Development Housing Choice Voucher Program and Minnesota Housing Subsidy Programs. The following questions will be answered. What are the subsidy programs? Who is eligible for a rental subsidy? What are my obligations as a property owner? Will I need an inspection? How is rent determined? What do property owners have to say? Property owners may have an opportunity to work with the Federal Housing Choice Voucher Program or with other local rental subsidy programs. Many property owners know the Housing Choice Voucher Program by its previous name of Section 8. The purpose of subsidies is to support households in renting market rate units in the community of their choice.
Currently, the Housing Choice Voucher Program nationwide has over 2 million vouchers. The state of Minnesota currently has approximately 32,000, and the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority administers over 4,600 of those vouchers just for the Minneapolis area. The Housing Choice Voucher Program is a program that assists families in paying a portion of their rent. It is geared towards low-income families. The general process for a Housing Choice Voucher participant to become eligible for our program is they would be on our waiting list. They would go through our intake process for us to verify that they meet the qualifications of the program. They would then attend what's called a briefing, where they learn the program rules and regulations that they would need to abide by. It would also teach them how to search for housing, and then they would be issued a voucher with a moving packet, and they would begin their housing search. Once they located a landlord that they wanted to rent from, the landlord and the participant would complete the moving paperwork, the moving packet, together. The participant would then contact their housing authority and turn that paperwork into them to determine if the unit meets the affordability for the family, that it meets rent reasonableness, and the housing authority would then contact the landlord to schedule the housing quality standards inspection. Provided that the unit passes the HQS inspection, the housing authority would then go into a HAP contract with the landlord and begin rental assistance. You're going to want to work with the Housing Choice Voucher Program because it gives you some additional assistance with the families. There's a large portion generally of the rent that's paid by the program, and then the family is required to adhere to their family obligations, and they'll be more likely to follow the rules of your site and your lease in order to retain their Housing Choice Voucher assistance.
The mission of Minnesota Housing is to finance and advance affordable housing opportunities for low and moderate income persons in Minnesota, and to enhance the quality of life and foster strong communities. Minnesota Housing Rental Assistance Programs have advanced the mission through 3 of the agency's strategic priorities. 1, finance new affordable housing opportunities. Secondly, preserve existing affordable housing opportunities. And 3, prevent and end long-term homelessness. The long-term goal of each program is to increase housing stability through transition to self-sufficiency, permanent rental subsidy, or other affordable housing. We really appreciate the participation of landlords in the rental assistance programs because we could not do this without support of landlords and owners.
The Housing Choice Voucher Program involves a screening process whereby families must meet certain eligibility criteria in order to qualify. This process is not intended to replace your own tenant screening. Minnesota Housing partners with organizations to administer their rental subsidies. Partner organizations develop their own screening and administrative criteria, which is similar to the Housing Choice Voucher program.
The screening process is the families have to meet certain income levels in order to qualify for the assistance. Each individual housing authority can choose to do their own criminal background checks if they choose to do so. We are required to do sex offender checks, as there are 2 reasons why you would be banned from receiving the assistance, and those 2 reasons would be that you're a level 3 sex offender, or you've been convicted of manufacturing methamphetamine while residing in a public housing or Section 8 unit. We do encourage each individual landlord to complete their own screening processes, as the housing authorities is a minimal process. The participants of the Housing Choice Voucher program must comply with the family obligations. Some of the family obligations, they will only use the units for the housing of their family. They'll only have 1 unit. They'll report any income or household composition changes to the housing authority in an appropriate amount of time. If they don't follow the family obligations, they could lose their Housing Choice Voucher assistance.
Tenants have obligations they must follow to maintain their voucher, and property owners also have responsibilities to remain in good standing. These responsibilities include complying with housing quality standards and the federal and state laws that govern these vouchers.
The relationship of the housing authority between the tenant and the property owner is what we like to call the golden triangle. The golden triangle is the landlord and the tenant have a relationship because of the lease. The tenant and the housing authority have a relationship because of the Housing Choice Voucher assistance. And the landlord and the housing authority have a relationship because of the housing assistance payment contract. The landlord is required by the contract, the HAP contract, to enforce their lease. So if the participant is not paying their rent portion or has other lease violations, it is the expectation that the landlord will enforce their lease. A landlord who chooses to rent to a Housing Choice Voucher participating family should treat them just as they would treat a market rate family. They need to enforce their lease. If the family is violating the lease in any way, such as non-payment of rent, it is expected that the landlord will enforce the lease and file any necessary paperwork for evictions if they so choose to do that.
Property owners who wish to receive a subsidy must make their rental unit available for a Housing Quality Standards, or HQS, inspection. This inspection ensures that the unit is decent, safe, and sanitary. After the unit passes inspection, the property owner will be eligible to enter into a rental subsidy contract with the administering organization of the subsidy.
Housing quality standards were established so that it would be universal across the United States. And it's the same code, and then each housing authority has its own administrative policy, and we change and upgrade that policy each and every year based on what we feel our needs are. But the intent, I believe, with HUD in establishing housing quality standards was so that it would be universal and be able to be integrated in any city.
The subsidy program rents must be both reasonable and affordable. The maximum amount of rent that can be charged is called a payment standard. The payment standard is used to calculate the subsidy amount that a housing authority or administrator can pay. Here are a couple examples of how this works. In this example, the payment standard for 3 bedrooms is $1,331. If you have a single-family home and the tenant is responsible for gas, heat, and electricity, the contract rent would be $1,077. Using the same example, if a tenant only pays for electricity, the contract rent could be $1,283.
Utility allowances are based on average consumption per unit size, unit type, such as if it's a home versus an apartment building, and we are required to calculate those annually if there's a 10% decrease or increase.
The 4 W's of subsidy payments. Who will pay me? The housing authority or administrator will send their portion directly to the property owner. Typically, a tenant will be assigned a portion of the rent that they pay directly to the owner. This amount is determined by the family household income. What amount can I charge? The amount a property owner can receive for rent is determined by the payment standard. The payment standard is determined by the bedroom size. Contract rent is determined after factoring in the tenant-paid utilities and unit type, such as single-family home, apartment, or duplex. When will I receive payment? Before the rent subsidy can be paid, the unit has to pass a housing quality inspection. Once it does, you will enter into a contract with the housing authority or administrator. The subsidized portion will come directly to you without having to submit a bill. Where? Depending on where your property is located, payment standards will vary, along with the housing authority or administrator. The rent payment may be less than what a property owner is advertising for rent. So, in an attempt to receive higher rent than the payment standards allow, property owners may attempt to collect extra money from the tenant. This is called a side deal. For example, an owner is asking $950 for rent, but the payment standard is only $900. So the property owner tells the tenant that they can pay him an additional $50 a month on the side.
If you try to collect extra because you really wanted to rent the apartment for $1,200 and the program is only going to allow a rent of $1,000, you will wind up in deep trouble. It's prohibited by federal law. You can be prosecuted for collecting the extra money. There's significant penalties. You just can't do it.
Well, as a landlord, I've had, it goes the gamut with the tenants that are on the Housing Choice Voucher Program. We have, there are good and there are not so good, just like with the general population. But I will say that I've had some tenants that have been with me since I started in the business in 2002, and they've actually changed and grown with me and changed units if their family size has changed, gone up or down. And I'd say that the one that comes to mind, she's been with me, like I said, since I think just about 2002, and she works and she's contributing to society, which can sometimes be a preconception or preconceived idea about the Housing Choice Voucher. There are people that work and there are people that don't work. There are people on disability or have disabilities, those that don't. So it's a wide range of people. But with this particular tenant, she works. She's been at the same place for a number of years, a hospital here locally, and I've seen her kids grow up, and now actually her daughter, who is not on the Housing Choice Voucher, actually rents from me as well. So that's been a very pleasant experience, and she's a very clean person, keeps up with her house and makes sure her rent is there, her copay is there every month on time without fail, and has been since she started.
In summary, this segment provided information about subsidy programs, who participates, property owner and tenant obligations, inspections, and how rent payments are determined and paid out. As you can see, these rental subsidies are a community asset that provide affordable housing to tenants and stable income for property owners. If you are interested in working with subsidies, contact your local housing authority or organization that administers subsidies in your area.